How did you grow up? Like, what was your childhood like?
So I grew up in a small suburb of Massachusetts.
I grew up in Northern California.
I grew up in Ghana.
We moved to a certain place in New Jersey.
And then I moved to New Jersey.
I left Ghana when I was 3, so I don't really remember much. I lived in New Jersey in these apartment buildings.
I don't remember too much from New Jersey, but it was fun there. I had a bunch of friends. Actually, most of my friends, they were white. I don't remember any of my black friends from New Jersey, if I even had any.
I'm trying to remember white friends I had, and the only white friend I can remember is in preschool. Her name was Crystal.
I was the only Indian in my class.
In my grade school, I was the only Indian kid.
But then once you get to AP
Right.
and CP, I was always the 1 or 2 black person.
But you had the kids who, never or almost never had a black friend before. And they were always oh, can
Whoa,
I? Yeah,
you're
it was
a black
what is
friend.
this? You're a shiny Pokemon. What are the odds? Or something. But they would always ask to touch my hair.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of people have to deal with growing up as the only Asian or the only minority or whatever
Yeah.
in very white neighborhoods, whereas for us it wasn't necessarily about being the only Asian kid. It was about being too fobby or too whitewashed.
My family is really un-Indian, I guess. My mom and dad always wanted me to learn Marathi, but they never spoke it at home. So we were always just speaking English with little bits of Marathi.
My mom always made sure that we were proud and aware of our heritage.
Yeah.
She would teach us to read and write our native language at home and stuff.
I was embarrassed of bringing more ethnic foods to school.
Oh. But you said that, and why would you feel embarrassed if most of the people are Asian?
I think because I would see other people with Lunchables and
so
even
they're
though we
kind
were
of- yeah.
all similar, we were still suspect to general American culture, because I think every family had different levels of assimilation.
Yeah, yeah.
And even if you weren't the most assimilated, you would see other people who were more assimilated or something like that.
Right, yeah.
My parents were mostly just assimilate into American culture. We didn't speak English when we, my parents did, but they because English is the national language of Ghana, so they know English.
Oh, yeah.
At home we
Yeah.
speak Chui, but they were just oh, you need to learn English, so they would mostly just focus on that.
At some point, it did become that I just stopped speaking my parents' language altogether. I just only spoke English, just from being at school and being more convenient.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't think much of it. They would still speak only our language at home. And
Yeah.
then when I got older, it just kind of got weird to even try speaking my language with other people my age who I knew would also spoke it.
When your parents kind of enforce that oh, you can't talk in a certain way, did people ever tell you things oh, you don't talk like a black person, or why do you sound so white, or I don't know,
Yeah.
is that a thing that...
So actually, a lot of people have said that to me. They always say you don't use any slang, or you don't talk rappers do. Or I'm sure they didn't say exactly that, but
Yeah.
something similar to that.
Yeah.
And I was always yeah, I just never wanted to talk like that. This is how I'm used to talking.
You never wanted to, or you just it's because that's well, I guess it's because you're used to talking like that.
Yeah.
But I guess
Well, I don't know, cause I would hear my friends talk like that, and I thought it was confusing, trying to figure out what they were saying a lot of the time. So I always figured I don't want to be confusing if I'm talking to someone. I just want to get my point across however I can.
So the first person who I interviewed who is Indian, he told me that,
Apparently, I thought I was white for some time.
and so, but you, on the other hand, you were kind of brought up to kind of really identify with that part of yourself, and you kind of you identified as Indian and stuff, but then eventually you kind of, I guess, establish yourself in this more American culture. And
Yeah.
So that you kind of...
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more. I think it's definitely something that I've always been confused about. How I identify myself culturally. I have a hard time saying that I'm like totally Indian, but I also have a hard time saying that I'm totally American.
There's like this new Indian where you're like born here, but you're like a really pseudo Indian, and you just watch a lot of Bollywood movies and like do Bhangra or something like that. And you're kind of doing all the things, but you're really American in values and like really materialistic. I think there's a similar thing with Chinese people, that there's like this hardworking old Chinese values and being shrewd and good with money, and then there's like Chinese youth who were born here who are more focused on like fashion and things like that.
Do you find that you're kind of well connected to your cultural heritage?
I think I'm all right. Like, I can speak Chinese well enough. Like, I speak with an accent, but like when I do go abroad, at least in Taiwan, most people assume that I was born there and just went to school in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not fooling anybody like into thinking that I'm like a native Taiwanese individual, but like they assume that I spent like my childhood here or something.
You said that you had like a lot of Asian friends in
Yeah.
your high school. Do you feel like they kind of were not super comfortable with you, or like they were initially kind of like cautious, or like
Well,
had that sort of?
Not really. Like I had like one Chinese friend, and then I think a Filipino friend. Most of them were like Indian,
Yeah.
Pakistani,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think they were like, I would always have like my Indian friends would always be like, sometimes it was the summer, they come back with, oh, I'm dark, but not as dark as you, Liz, but just like stuff like that. Like, just like comments about, I think there's a lot of colorism in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
in that group,
Yeah.
where it's just like the lighter Indian and like the lighter Middle Eastern, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
I think it's really stupid. It's like definitely the first thing they always comment on. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most about the way they comment about it is they act like it's my fault that I'm like the color that I am. Like, they'll be like, oh, like why don't you like try to like stay out of the sun, or like why don't you like do these skincare routines that you didn't ask me to tell you about to make your skin look fair. I don't really care about what color my skin is at the moment, but I just suddenly get really self-conscious about it when I'm at home, because like my family thinks it's like my grandma's like acting like it's the end of the world if I get darker. Yeah. And I know, like, I've talked about this with my other Indian friends here and stuff, and like it's like the same with them. Like one of my best friends, she's like she kind of has like a darker complexion, but her mom has like a really, really fair like white complexion, and like everyone on her mom's like side of the family kind of like looks down on her for turning out the way she did. But it's like, what is she supposed to do? Like her dad is like has like a darker complexion, which is like where she got that.
Yeah.
And it's like what do you expect, and like what do you even expect like people to do about it?
Yeah.
If like they turned out the way they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really stupid.
Do you like talk to your friends a lot about this sort of thing, or do you like this sort of thing as in like kind of racial issues, and like especially like, you know, now that someone like Trump is elected, I know that definitely like I have like several black friends who are kind of scared for their lives, like,
Yeah.
you know. So I was just like wondering if you kind of feel the same way, or like whether you've talked to other people who kind of feel that way.
There was a story I saw where, this was before Trump, some Indian grandpa was visiting for a short time.
I think it was like around Christmas break last year, something like that. No, it was around the summer. Yeah, it was summer. It was summer of last year, because that's when Pokemon Go came out.
Yeah.
But it was myself, my friend Jordan, who's black, and my other friend Matt, who's white. The three of us have been like best friends since middle school. And this is in Florida, so we're walking on the sidewalk. We're just heading to Checkers to get some food.
One pretty typical Indian thing is to just walk around the neighborhood and usually like have your hands like kind of behind your back, just like casually walking around,
Yeah.
looking at things,
Yeah.
especially after you eat. So I guess his grandpa was doing something like that, and he was visiting because he just had a new grandson, so he was coming to see.
But it's like 2 in the morning or something like that.
Yeah.
And we're playing Pokemon Go and like, you know, talking and laughing, having a good time.
Yeah.
And as we're playing, I looked up and as we were passing a like a strip mall with like a bunch of stores.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of stores next to each other.
Yeah.
There was a cop car just parked in one of the parking spots.
These cops just saw him. I don't know exactly what the story was, whether someone called it in, but they confronted him and like he didn't really speak English well.
He didn't drive over to us. Like the cop car was just sitting there.
Yeah.
But as soon as I saw the cop car, like a wave of fear shot through me.
He was trying to say like, oh, I'm from nearby.
My first instinct was to just like run across the street or like get far away from the cop car before something bad happened.
Like they just thought he was a threat or he wasn't cooperating.
It should not be anyone's first reaction to seeing a cop car.
Yeah.
But I was like actually terrified as soon as I saw that because it was just us 3 alone on the sidewalk, and like if the cop decided to get out of the car and like
So they kind of
try to start something,
threw him on his back,
it was only up to us 3 to like stop him. Like there was no one else around to help us.
and then he ended up being paralyzed from the waist down because of that.
My God.
That sort of reality scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
I didn't like mention it to them at all. I didn't say like, yo, there's a cop car, like be careful or anything. I just kept it to myself. But I noticed like that was my first reaction, like to be scared when I saw the police, and
Yeah.
that's not how it should be like anywhere.
So my dad didn't like understand that just happens because apparently like police just don't really care to look at the situation before doing something weird.
They're meant to protect us, not make us feel like we're gonna get shot or like, you know, not to make us scared in any sense or in any way.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's something I noticed. That's like a huge issue that, I mean, it doesn't like stop overnight. You can't solve this overnight, but
Yeah.
like it is like the reality a lot of us live with.
And for whatever reason, people who it doesn't happen to deny it despite like the prevalence of it.
Even if I'm not like part of the African American stereotype or anything, if I don't fit into that, I have to remember that, yeah, I am still black and this sort of thing still does apply to me. And it does scare me, but I mean, there's nothing I could really do about it right now, you know?
Yeah. As I was growing up, I might have, like, I initially kind of had like a distrust for black people, and that was because I think like my dad, for example, like he initially had to like attend like a black college because like he initially like couldn't like get into the program of his choice, and like he started from like a fairly low point academically, but he wanted to like, you know, work his way up to like a PhD. But I think that while he was there, he had like fairly negative experiences with black people, so that kind of caused him to be like a little bit distrustful, and it probably just reinforced like his belief of that, like of that stereotype. So like it's like when I started becoming friends with like some black people, like it felt kind of weird because it's like because it's like different from what I was used to, if that makes sense. Like I'm not really sure how to explain it. I don't know if you've heard about that or if like you're aware of that kind of like.
I'm like aware of it on like a very vague sense. Like I know like my friend would be like, oh, my parents would never let me date a black person.
Like I don't think my like immediate family, like my parents, would really like make a fuss regardless of like who I chose to marry.
But yeah, in terms of like dating and stuff like that, I don't know. I don't fuck with that shit. So like,
Oh, okay.
my parents haven't really ever had to have that conversation with me.
But my like extended family would definitely like make comments and look down on it if I like married someone who wasn't Indian. Or especially, or actually probably even if I married someone who was Indian but like not like Telugu.
The only like serious girlfriend I've had in the past, she was white, and my mom didn't care. My parents didn't care. Like they didn't say anything about that.
Yeah.
And like they've always like my mom's always joked with me, and she said things like, "Why don't you find yourself like a nice black girl to date or something?"
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm always like, I mean, if one comes around and I like them, like sure,
Yeah.
but like race isn't really the first thing I look for.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I usually look for if I find someone attractive, and if I do, then I see what I do from there.
Yeah.
I'm like a shy person, so most of the time nothing like comes out of that.
Yeah.
But like my parents have never put pressure on me to date a specific type of girl or to not date a specific type of girl.
I had this conversation. Well, conversation / argument with my dad about dating.
Right.
And I'm pretty liberal. I think that like I still hold the view that it doesn't matter like what race or what kind of person you date as long as they're good people.
Right.
And then my dad was saying how like there are certain races that you need to be careful of, or it's more like because he's like, okay, if you date someone and then if you end up marrying them, you also have to accept their family into your life. And so the problem with that is that there might be like certain racial groups that have like certain views that could be like problematic, or like certain attitudes that like you might not agree with, or like that. Just like, okay, basically stick to Asians or white people, preferably. So it's just I don't know. It's just
I do know some parents who like don't want their kids dating someone from like a certain race or ethnicity or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I think sucks.
Yeah.
Personally, but if that's their family's decision, it's not really my place to say don't do that or like change the way you're thinking. Like it's just the way you're thinking, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm like almost done here. Let me just think about like the last thing to talk about.
I think something I want to bring up is like I've been using Twitter a lot this summer, and I followed a lot of different groups. Most of them are like writers and stuff. And what I noticed is like there was this conversation about why, because like the whole idea of allies and like not being a part of a group, but also like talking about their issues or like promoting it.
Yeah.
So there was questions of like, why do people bring up some issues but not other issues?
Yeah.
And I feel like that relates a lot to like Asian Americans.
Yeah.
Because so I'm doing this series of drawings about like language and women, and I was trying to do a lot of women of color. And I found that when I searched like Asian women of color, like history, I would get basically nothing. And I was like, there's definitely a huge gap in like how we look at women of color, like Asian women of color. Because I was trying to find like, because like the whole series is about like people like who've achieved things, but because of their gender, they're like, when women are ambitious, you're like, oh, you're like a career woman. You're like, you know what I mean? That kind of whole language towards women and who are like working women. Yeah. So I was trying to find a lot of like examples of like Asian working women. And when I just like, it was just so hard to find. It was like I'd have to search specific, like I'd have to search literally Asian women who've done this instead of being like history of women, like instead of just searching like women of color who've done something, all the lists would just be like either black people who've done this or white women who have done this. I feel like a lot of black people who are at least aware, because I don't think a lot of black people know the issues that Asian Americans are dealing with. Like I feel like most of it is just like, oh, they're basically a race that white people are like, at least you're not black. Because I feel like the relationship is like, oh, that's kind of how the relationship is. So there's less, like I feel like if you had to do like a hierarchy, like it would be like white people and then like Asian people, as in the people who are like have it better off.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's why I don't see a lot of conversations from within Black groups about like Asian groups. Like Spanish people are treated basically like Black people.
Yeah,
like,
definitely. Yeah.
But there's a distinction between Asian people, and like I definitely need to try and understand those issues more. But I just noticed that there's not really a lot of resources to like look about it, and there's not a lot of huge conversations going out.
Portrait drawing in general is a very like intimate experience, because like you're kind of just like staring at someone for a really long time and like just trying to like not only just capture their physical features, but like trying to capture like the essence of like how they are as a person. But like at the same time, like I feel like with a lot of like portrait drawings, you really are only trying to like get someone at like a surface level. It's like purely just like how they look and trying to make it look the same. But like the motivation for this project was to kind of like allow me to get a better understanding of other people's cultural views. But I think that we should all like be able to talk to each other about this. It's good to kind of like take risks and sometimes like ask uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
I don't know. What do you think your cultural perspective is now?
I mean, like, where do I kind of belong culturally? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I completely belong in Thailand because of, you know, the language barrier.
Right.
People would, like, be at the vendors, like the street vendors or like the store vendors in Thailand. Like I would kind of talk to my parents in English or whatever, and like they would just kind of like go to my parents and be like, oh, why doesn't she speak Thai? Like they would say that to them in like Thai, believing that like I don't understand them, or like I don't know. And it's just like really weird because like I just feel kind of like alienated from that culture, and I feel like I shouldn't be. I mean, like people can see me and be like, okay, she's Thai, she's one of us. It's just, you know, all based off like the superficial sort of appearance-wise thing.
Right.
Like I know that I won't be discriminated against because I just look like them.
Right.
But the problem is that like, you know, being able to like assimilate into a culture, like it's just like language is a really important part of it. But at the same time, I feel kind of like alienated from like the American culture as well. Like I don't, like I was like too far away from the States for too long, so like I'm not like always like very up to date on, or like when I came here for college, like I wasn't very up to date with like the politics and whatnot, and like I like didn't know too much about like U.S. history. And like there's this sort of weird like disconnection between me and like the culture here, and like I don't really know. I still don't know. This is actually the conversation I had with like the very first person I interviewed. And I was just saying, I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
And even now I feel like I don't know. So yeah, I don't know if I actually got anywhere with these interviews. But at least I know a little bit more. Alright, I think I'm almost done here.
Cool.
I think I'm actually about done. Okay, well yeah, thanks for our conversation.
No problem. It's super cool watching you work.
Thanks. Alright, you can